to say more about why you think it was targeted by Elon Musk and Donald Trump.
It was targeted because the immediate beneficiaries, the long-term beneficiaries like the American people, they don't realize that they are. It protects the United States. The reason that they targeted it is it has a relatively weak constituency because the beneficiaries are in the global south. You don't see the programs. If you saw the programs, there'd be no one in the Congress voting against it. I know some far right-wing, very conservative senators and congressmen who are Republicans. Went to the South with Democrat or Republican administrators. They came back saying, I'm not going to oppose this anymore. I'm with this. Chris Wallace went with AID to Ukraine, said, I've never been a fan of foreign aid. He came back and said, I'll never criticize it again. I saw what they're doing. It's astonishing. I took some prominent conservatives to Afghanistan, and they came back and said the same thing, including Rush Limbaugh. And he said that publicly in his own program. When they see the programs, they support it. The reason that they went after them, it has a weak constituency. They wanted to make an example and show that they're in charge, they're in power, and they can crush our programs and our agency. And the consequence for the American people is we don't have an early warning system for disease anymore. There are 90 missions, 90 countries that have early warning systems that AID installed over the last couple of decades for disease outbreaks. We're not going to have that anymore. It's going to disappear. It's already shut down now. In my view, this is an enormous risk for the United States. You know what happens when famines take place? People start moving en masse. If we shut down the emergency programs in AID, which is what's happened, we are going to have famines across the globe, and guess where they're going to end up? In Europe and the United States. The people, when they start panicking, they start moving. In almost every famine that's taken place in the last 50 years. And we're gonna pay the price later on.
Let me ask you one more question. You touched on this. The workforce at USAID, I was in the Bush administration, and I remember Condi Rice, as only she could do with her swagger, walking in and demanding more funds for USAID because of the importance of the mission. And I remember George W. Bush rarely saying no to USAID or to you or Condi Rice. But I wonder if you could just tell me what the workforce was like when you turned this agency so conservative compared to the administration from which you took it over.
We had 1,200 Foreign Service officers and 1,200 civil servants. We had about 6,500, 7,500 Foreign Service nationals. They're people who come from the country itself. They're not Americans here. They live they work in the aid mission, many of them for a long time. That is a training ground for local leaders, for example. The first woman prime minister in Costa Rica was a USAID Foreign Service national for 10 years. The first woman vice president of El Salvador was an FSN. The first lady of Peru under a conservative president was an FSN, and her husband got a PhD with AID scholarship. I can go around the world, and I could do it for a whole hour and tell you how the AID missions, in fact, were the base for training people who went on to become leaders in their country. They're pro-American. You know what's happening now? All that's going to shut down. We used to give 20,000 scholarships a year in AID to people from the developing world. They go back and they change their countries. You know how much how many scholarships they're doing? 40,000 scholarships, double what we did during the Cold War. And they're coming back speaking Mandarin, and the United States is just retreating from the battlefield. We've lost the first battle with the Chinese and the Russians, not by losing because our programs aren't there, but because we're leaving. It's disgusting. It's outrageous. It's an egregious affront to the American people.
I only regret that I didn't find you and get you on this program a few days ago. I do want to have that whole around the world conversation. I need to do two things.